And I am thrilled to have our first guest, Larry Seidlin, known as Judge Larry Seidlin, in the Bronx, New York. He was a state court judge for the Circuit Court of the 17th Judicial Circuit of the state of Florida in and for Broward County. He was the presiding judge during the infamous Anna Nicole Smith case and involving custody of her young child after her death. Judge Seidlin, are you there?
Oh, I'm right with you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Our listeners are thrilled to hear from you. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure. Always a pleasure to be with you.
Did you ever think that as a state court judge you would become famous from a case?
No, it's interesting you asked that question. I spent 26 years on the bench, and the chief judge was my friend. I had half juvenile and half probate. And he says to me, look, we're going to have to either give you one or the other. Pick one full division. I figured I'd take probate. They're all dead, and it's quiet in there. So I take probate, and 3 months later, all hell broke loose.
So that leads to my next question. Was this something as part of your just normal rotation as a judge, or was it specially assigned to you, or did you request it?
No one requests a hurricane. What happened was I was on my way to lunch with my wife. We were going to go get a nice Greek meal, and my judicial assistant, my secretary, calls me and says, "Oh, there's some case, Anna Nicole, and they want an emergency hearing." So I didn't know who Anna Nicole was. If she played second base for the Yankees, I would have known who she was. And my wife says, "You know who that is?" And she started explaining, and the next thing I knew, I shot right back to the courthouse. It was picked by a computer, random selection.
Well, looking back, are you glad that it was you?
There's good and bad when you receive fame. Every nut comes after you for anything and everything, and then it's fun to be recognized when you're walking down the street. Someone will say, "Hey, aren't you Judge Larry?" And I say, "Yes." It's good and it's bad.
No, I understand that. Honestly, I wasn't even going to talk to you about the Anna Nicole Smith case, but I figured it's something that probably everybody asks you about. But what I really want to know, is it true that you used to be in your former life a taxi cab driver in New York?
Yeah, it's interesting. The New York Post ran a front page story. Former taxi driver in charge of Anna Nicole's body. And I drove a taxi. I went to St. John's Law School at night, and I drove a cab a couple of nights a week, and I taught school. I was also a substitute teacher in New York.
Of all of your jobs, I would expect that driving a cab, and you see these TV shows on cable, these taxi cab true confessions. How true are those experiences as a cab driver?
Well, some of it's true. People treat you very differently because you're a cab driver. I think the average Joe can appreciate the cab driver. I think some of the wealthy are a little bit snooty towards the cab driver. And there's a lot of truth to the stories in a cab. It's like going to your hairdresser. People let it down and tell you what's going on.
Well, I'm sure you brought humor to that job. I'm sure you treated everybody kindly like you did in the Anna Nicole Smith case. I think in watching that case, people got to know you and know your personality a bit. I mean, you have a sense of humor. Is that fair to say?
Well, I would think so. I probably drive my wife crazy with it, yes. But I guess Diane Sawyer, when we were together, described me a cross between Larry David and Judge Judy. So I thought that was cute.
One of my producers asked if I would please ask you a question, and the question is this. How many pencils did you break during the Anna Nicole Smith trial?
I thought you were going to ask me how many tears did I shed.
No, we're going to get to that in a minute.
I guess I broke a bunch of pencils. I was banging heads together. My approach to the justice system is to try to resolve things, try to mediate it, try to massage the cases. I had them in my chambers many times when I wasn't in front of the TV set, and I was trying to get to a position, and I think we reached it in the case. You saw them all holding hands at the end of the Anna Nicole case. They were all in front of the courthouse holding hands. I want to take a little credit for that.
Being a practicing lawyer, former prosecutor, defense attorney now, I'm going to give you all the credit because what I think when people see someone on the steps of the courthouse, they don't appreciate necessarily the role of the judge behind the scenes, as you state, and I give you a lot of credit for that because it's an incredibly difficult position for you. And do you? The tears you just referenced. I mean, I have to ask you about it. I mean, the case got to you on an emotional level, on a personal level. Can you talk about that?
Yes, trying to reach a result. You have to remember that I was a juvenile and family judge. I was in divisions that no one else wanted to be in. And I spent really my adult life as a judge. I took the bench. I was the youngest judge in Florida at the age of 28.
Wow.
And I had a little daughter then. I got married late. I got married at the age 50. And I knew I was going to retire quickly after that case. And I wasn't going to be there for Danny Lynn. I wanted to be there like I was for all the kids in my court system. And I was just hoping that she'd have a good result, that Larry Burkhead would treat her like he is now. He's been a wonderful father towards her, and she seems to be getting a nice childhood.
And do you follow her progress? I mean, do you do that with other cases as well? I mean, you sort of track the progress of these kids?
I was just eating a gyro the other day, and the cashier said, Judge Larry, I was in front of you. You were so good to me. Look now, I'm working, and I'm an asset to the community. And my daughter was with me, so I felt good about it. I wanted to make a little bit of a difference with young people, and hopefully I had some success with some children. And the expression, it's cheaper to build a child than to remake a man.
No, that's a great saying. And do you miss your time on the bench?
No, I enjoyed when I was there, but I do what you do now. I practice law, and I have more space and more freedom. You know, as a judge, you're on 24 hours a day. You're in a fishbowl, and you're always being watched and looked at. I guess I'm still a little bit in a fishbowl, becoming the pop icon that we describe me as. And but I like doing what I'm doing now. I get to watch my daughter a lot. She's a tennis player. I get to see her hitting the ball.
That's great.
And I'm in the process of writing another book, which should be some fun.
That's great.
I like what I'm doing now. I spent enough time in that building. I'm okay to get out of it.
Yeah, you touched on something just a couple minutes ago, and in terms of talking and in chambers and trying to bring both sides to the table, if you will. I mean, what are your thoughts on civility between lawyers, or the lack of civility? I practice law in Maryland, and I tell you, Judge Larry, it's very hard in the trenches, and it's very hard between counsel, and it's very uncivilized many times. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's burning a lot of the lawyers out. I guess that's why we jog a lot and exercise. You're required, as you know, every time you present a motion to the court, you're required to make a good faith effort to try to resolve it with the other side. And obviously, a lot of times that's not done. The other side's not agreeing to it because they want to run that meeting. Remember the taxi? I was a taxi driver. Sometimes when you go you go to Manhattan to Queens to the airport, some of those cab drivers would take you through Staten Island to run up the meter. I know you don't practice law like that, and I don't practice law where we're just trying to keep the case going. But unfortunately, that's what happens. They keep the case going to keep the dough rolling in.
What kinds of cases are you handling as a private practitioner now, and do you find that your fame, if you will, impacts decisions or juries or even litigants?
Well, I like having the, life is having a little bit of leverage, having a little more strength than your opponent. And I feel it helps me. I do family law. I do commercial transactions. and I do criminal cases too. And I partner up with the best lawyers that I can. I could select anyone I want, so I pick my best partners, and we kick tail. We do pretty well with it. I like it. I like working with them, and I pick clients. If I don't like the client, I don't take the case.
Good for you.
Yeah.
That's actually something that I subscribe to as well. So just keep me in mind if you ever want to kick some tail in Maryland. You call me, okay?
Well, I like Maryland. I was in Maryland. My daughter went to the USTA, the tennis, has one of their headquarters is in Maryland. And so we were right across from the University of Maryland. It's beautiful. We drove over to Washington, to Georgetown. And that town's really cooked.
Yeah, that's great. Totally different to practice law in D.C. though than in the suburbs in Maryland, and really all over the state. It's amazing, and I don't know if Florida was like this. Tell me if it was. Just county to county, the differences in justice, if you will. I mean, just really different.
Absolutely. I was lucky. I was elected. We have a judges conference. I was the vice president of the judges for the state of Florida, which allowed me to travel all over the state and meet with the judges and see what was going on. Every town is different. Every town in this country performs justice in a different manner. And even in your own county, in my own county, one case, one judge would do it so differently than the next judge. Justice is not perfect, as you and I know, and different judges have a different view of how a sentence or a civil case should be handled.
No, it is amazing for me. I try and stay on my own turf though, where I have the upper hand in Montgomery County. You know, the home of the sniper. If you remember that case, that's the county that I practice in, where Mike Tyson got into trouble. That's my county. A couple of final questions. It's Rene Sandler on Scream and Shout. I'm talking with Judge Larry Seidlin. We all know from the Nicole Smith case, and we've seen him on TV, and we love his sense of humor, and we love his intellect. A couple last questions for you. I hear that you have an opinion about psychics in the courtroom. Can you share that with us?
Well, they were pitching me in L.A. for a show called Psychic Court, and you know, I've visited with a few psychics in my life. You just got to find one that's legitimate. And I had fun with her. My wife and I spent some time with this psychic. So what we were doing was, we were having a psychic in the courtroom, and then she would give input and evaluate whether or not witnesses were telling the truth. But the judge, me being the judge, would still make the ultimate decision. It was a little bit of a kicker towards the justice system. It was small claims court like all the judge shows are, with the added addition of having a psychic.
Interesting. I mean, you know, you see this on shows, psychics, jury consultants, voodoo, all kinds of things. And who knows where it's all going to lead in the end. My final question for you, Judge, and it's for our young listeners. We have a lot of lawyers that listen, a lot of younger lawyers just out of law school. I mean, what are your thoughts about the current state of our legal system? What advice did you give your students? What advice do you give young people? We're dealing with technology, abuses of social media, increases in the use of drugs. I mean, what do you tell young lawyers, young people? What advice can you impart on them?
I would impart the following, that I taught at the local law school here, Noble Law School, and I would teach also, there was a seminar for new lawyers. I would say to them to be prepared. Be prepared, write all the questions down that you want to address to each witness, and check it off as you're asking each question, get the answer you're intending, and also speak to these witnesses before the case even begins. Now, you can't do that, obviously, in federal court, but you should be prepared. And also, when you have the time, sit in the back of the courtroom and watch that judge that you're going to appear in front of him or her, and see their personality and their likes and dislikes. And also sit in the courtroom as much as you can in front of the other judges and see what good lawyers do and what bad lawyers do.
In other words,
be
prepared, do your homework on the judge you're appearing in front of, and be ready for the fight.
Yeah, I would learn their eccentricities, their oddities. Each person, you need to know your opponent, and you need to know who your referee is, who the judge is. You need to understand them.
Well, that's excellent advice, and advice actually I followed my career from a judge who mentored me, and I appreciate it very much. Judge Larry Seidlin, thank you so much for being here. Tell
My
people where
pleasure.
they can find you. Where can we find you?
Well, I'm in Fort Lauderdale, and my cell phone.
All right. Judge Larry Seidlin, thank you so much for being here, and please come back and join us again.
Well, I will. You asked very good questions. Enjoy.
Thank you. Judge Larry Seidlin, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, you know where to find him. He is the judge from the Anna Nicole Smith case. We have come to know and love him, watching him on TV shows, getting his analysis, obviously back in the legal profession, in private practice, and I think it would be quite a treat to see him in court or even oppose him in court. Interesting guest, and was a great judge who really took to heart what he was doing in that case for Anna Nicole Smith's child.